Hi, my name is Donna Rubin and welcome to Mat Chat. Mat Chat was a series that I designed to really get to know our yoga community just a little bit better. And it's always fascinated me who's actually practicing on their mat in your yoga studio with you and what brought them to yoga. Why are they doing yoga? How has yoga transformed their life? And now I'm really excited because I have just started my celebrity yogi series right now. I should say celebrity yoga teacher series right now. And my guest today is Barb Leese. She's a longtime friend of mine, a longtime practitioner of yoga. And actually, as we were just talking together, she reminded me that she's been practicing yoga for over 28 years. She's been teaching for almost 20 years. And she is actually leads her own teacher trainings. And what she also reminded me was that she is 500-hour and 200-hour certified by Yoga Alliance and specializing in the therapeutics of yoga. And she's going to be joining us in our teacher training. So we want to get to know Barb just a little bit better. And we go way, way back, the two of us, as we started our careers together in ballet at ballet school when we were like 9 and 10 years old. And but you'll hear a little bit about Barb's yoga journey, because we both have a dance background and dance journey, but this is different. This is our yoga journey. So welcome, Barb. Thank you for joining me today. And let's get to know you just a little bit better.
All right. Well, thanks, Donna. It's lovely to be here with you. And as you mentioned, our lives have interwound with one another for a few decades now. Yeah. And how interesting that we followed paths through both the dance world, the theater world in various ways, and that yoga also found a calling to us. And I'm delighted that even though our pathways were in different countries, they continue to intertwine with one another. So really wonderful to be here and to tell you a little bit more about myself.
Well, the thing that's so great right now is the ability to be able to do these kinds of things, being from, different countries. Like Barb is in Canada, I'm in New York right now. And this sort of new technology that we're all getting to be more comfortable with has really sort of opened the doors for us to be able to really do things together now. And I just love it. I just think it's fantastic. So yeah, our people in New York get a chance. Not only that, they're getting a chance to take classes from you each week, because you teach on Sundays, the yin yoga. So that's also fantastic. And Barb was actually part of our first bode teacher training in 2019. And she's also come to teach our yin training as well. And but first, to begin, I just always like to know, so who were you before you actually started yoga?
Well, who was I? Well, I was a human being then, and I think I'm maybe a human being with maybe a little more awareness now since coming into yoga. But certainly, as we both shared, we began as baby ballerinas, going through vigorous training and training that I loved, but it was hard, it was vigorous. We were taught to push beyond anything that we could ever maybe imagine doing, but to do so in a way that we were guided carefully. And so I became a ballerina. Yeah, for the first 10 years of my career, I was at the National Ballet and performed in Canada, the States, around the world, and worked performing classical contemporary works. And as the years went on, the body, the toll was being taken on the body, because in order to create some of the magnificence that dance and ballet in particular is able to offer to audiences, it does take a toll on bodies in different ways. Each body is different, and depending on, I was a very Gumby-like dancer, and so the stability in my body was harder for me to come by, and sometimes that can be a little more challenging. And so when I started to feel the body was starting to take a bit of a wear and tear, it was also when musical theater was evolving. And Phantom of the Opera opened up in Toronto. And again, we both made that segue. You led the way, and I joined you a year later to move into musical theater. And that was another aspect of my career where I was both performer, dance captain, and associate director, and was in charge of both the Toronto production, and then went out on the road as well with that into different areas. And during the Phantom years, doing 8 shows a week, again, a different sort of demand on the body. And I started to recognize I needed some sort of training to offset the demands that were being put onto my physical body where it began. And I started a yoga practice. It actually took me back. I actually began yoga when I was 3 years old with my mom. That's true. Yeah. As a little tiny girl, my mom did Korean's yoga on television. And every morning, my mom was a housewife of the 60s, and she did her yoga, and I did it with her. That's truly where it began, because I was too young to go to school, and so it kept me occupied. So going back to it in my mid-20s, it was kind of like going home in some ways. And it was a nice feeling. And it allowed me, between shows, I'd go uptown to do a yoga practice and then came back down to do the evening show. And some people in the cast wondered why on earth I was doing this. And I didn't really know, other than it just felt right. It kind of felt like I was putting Humpty Dumpty back together again.
It's so funny you say that, because honestly, I was one of those people who was wondering what you were doing going to yoga. I remember thinking about it and wondering, like, why would you actually, if you're a dancer and you go to ballet class and you stay in shape and everything, why would you need to go to yoga? And I know it was you and one of the other fellow cast members, Suzanne Brown, was also heavily, into yoga. And I used to look at her always and be like, what are you doing? Like, what is it that you're doing? And she'd say, oh, I'm doing yoga. And I'm like, yoga? Why? Like, I so much didn't get it back then. But so, yeah, it was basically your body that was talking to you, and then you found out that it could help you in terms of just keeping your body in the kind of shape. I mean, I'm assuming that you went into yoga first for the physical aspect of it before you started to understand all the rest of the benefits, right?
Absolutely. And I went into it to, as I said, to try. I just felt I needed to be balanced, because we were doing 8 shows a week, exactly the same movements, repetitive movements. And this comes right down to everyone in their lives. We have behavioral patterns that create repetitive movements. And yoga allows us the opportunity to rebalance areas that have been, maybe, as I say up here, going to Timmy's too often for a coffee, right? Kind of asleep, and other areas that are working way too hard. So I didn't know all of this at the time, but I just was able to feel instinctually it was the right thing to do for my body. It felt better. But what then happened, as I moved into other roles in theater, I became dance captain and associate director. So I was dealing with human psyche and human nature a lot more, in terms of having to interact with them, with critiques of the show, with asking of working out issues between cast members and so on. And I started to see that yoga practice was doing a heck of a lot more than just putting Humpty Dumpty's body back together again. It was actually allowing me, and I didn't have the words at that time, I do now from all of my studies, it was my nervous system, that it was allowing me to bring my mind into a quieter place, to come out of all the outward focus of doing, and to actually come back in and allow myself a greater window of tolerance in dealing with the different challenges that were coming at me in life.
Well, that's really interesting. I mean, that's the first I've heard you say that. So that was a major benefit then for you, because that job was extremely difficult, and just managing people is extremely difficult. So that's a really excellent, way to put it, actually. Yeah.
And it was only, with my accrued knowledge years later that I had hindsight into why it was working. I didn't at that time. I just knew it was kind of my reprieve. And truthfully, Donna, I think that is what yoga is. It allows us to redirect our focus, our awareness, and our energy back inwardly. So it's an hour, 90 minutes, whatever length of class and whatever style of class. This is the thing with yoga. It doesn't matter the style of practice that we're doing, but it must encompass this knowledge that yoga isn't just a physical practice. It is a mind. This is truly what mind body means. And we need to put it into tangible understandings for people, because sometimes those words get a little cosmic, and we're a society that we need to understand, what are you talking about? What does that mean?
Yes.
And what it means is we're able to let our mind become more in sort of a passenger and allow us to drop back into feeling is where it begins. And then an awareness of the breath is truly the missing link for most of us in trying to harness the thinking mind.
I agree. And it's such a lifelong process. It's amazing. You can be practicing for years and still have to be reminded and still have to, keep processing, keep learning, and just really be, kind to yourself in the process, because I know we're also goal oriented. And a lot of times people think that yoga is a goal, that you're trying to achieve a posture, you're trying to achieve something. And we forget that it's a lifelong, practice really for your own personal, well-being. But actually, with that said, so, here you were as a practitioner, you were practicing, you already gave us, some of the benefits that you've had, but how would you say that going on this yoga journey has kind of changed your life or transformed your life? Has there sort of been anything specific that you think was due to the fact that you started a yoga practice?
Yes. To put it in a nutshell, much has changed in me, in my life. I think to be as succinct as I can be, it is being more comfortable in my own skin, which hopefully comes with age as well. And we've got some of that on our side. But it's also, I think you already mentioned it, being patient with ourselves, which doesn't mean we become lazy. Absolutely. We have to head into challenges, into life, because life is challenging. That's not going to go away. But we have to learn how to manage those challenges. Loss of loved ones, separations, work challenges, health challenges, all of these things are going to parenting challenges, caring challenges for, older generations, younger generations. And I think finding patience with myself and an honesty as well, to know when I have done the very best that I can do and when I have to accept things for how they are, but continue to take responsibility for what I can do and what is out of my control. And I think that is probably the greatest gift that yoga has given me, and that I try to share and offer pathways for other people to find that in their lives. Because what it did for me and continues to do for me is going to be completely different for what it does, for you and other people. It's going to cross over to some degree, but each of our
It's
unique.
interesting. I mean, transformations, because you're right. It's like every single person is on their own journey, on their own path, on their own timing and everything. And when you ask somebody, what has yoga done, it will be different, for everyone. And I think for us as yoga teachers, trying to make people understand that and to be able to sort of inspire them to want to do a yoga practice, and that it will and can transform their lives. But until you experience it yourself, it's hard to really say what that's going to be. But I think just sharing what you just said, which is what it has done for you, I mean, these are all major important things in order to navigate this, crazy world that we live in right now. So, but also, I mean, it helped you make career changes too, wouldn't you say? Like just the fact that you got into yoga and what it did for you, it opened up other doors that you might not normally have taken, right?
Absolutely. Yoga is also in an infancy stage in North America. I think that's another important thing to recognize. As you're saying, Donna, that we want to help educate people. How do we educate? By bringing awareness. When there's awareness, we have knowledge. If we can borrow from BKS Iyengar's wonderful quote that awareness brings knowledge, which brings wellness. And it's that simple, and yet it is that challenging. And along with that, I would borrow from my studies of John F. Barnes' work, who is actually an American physical therapist, who really is one of the pioneers of this whole buzz of fascia. Yeah, he began it back in the 60s and has moved on to educate hundreds of thousands of physical therapists and wellness therapists in an understanding of what the fascial body is. And one of his most brilliant sayings, he's got many of them, is that without awareness, there are no options. And sometimes as a society, and I include myself in this, we're heads. We're just kind of heads running around, doing the best we can do, doing the most we can do. Yoga, awareness that comes through yoga by thinking about the left heel in a position, by thinking about what the breath feels like, bringing it up to a conscious awareness is what gives us options back in our life. So those options were the different pathways that I was able to choose to take. And when we choose a pathway, we then open the door for other pathways to appear. And that I am forever, ever grateful for. And because sometimes it takes courage, doesn't it, to step into a new direction. And if we think too far in the future, we're never going to take that step. But if we can just trust to just step the next foot forward, this is what yoga allows us as not only a practice on your mat, but truly yoga is a lifestyle. And what we learn on our mat more and more becomes apparent off of our mats.
Well put. I think that's great. I love it. I love it. I think that's so great. You can't hear this kind of thing enough. You just can't hear it enough, you know. We have to be constantly reminded, you know what I mean? It's just because it's too easy to just kind of go off onto our own little tangents and our own little worlds and sort of forget, the bigger picture. So now I'm going to ask you, as a teacher, what has been the most rewarding experience, that you've had in your teaching career of yoga?
I think what I would have to say is that if my work continues to allow people to truly wake up, to see themselves and to see the world around them with maybe just a little, even just a nugget of greater awareness, not always that we have to know what it is, but just an awareness of what we don't know, what we might like to learn more of, and also what we do know. I think that might be the greatest gift that I've heard from the many students that I've worked with over these last years, that they have found a greater awareness. They've woken up in their lives. And if that is not a more apparent need in our lives than it has been in these last couple of years specifically, but in general, I think we all can appreciate how incredibly important that is.
No, that's amazing. That's amazing. I mean, it just feels good to be able to help somebody in some way, even if it's just a small, tiny little way. We don't have to always do these big, massive, earth-shattering, things. That if we can just acknowledge the fact that if we can share with others, even just a little bit, like you just said, and that it has an impact on someone, then, what is better than that? I mean,
Yeah,
I find
it is.
myself as well. It's pretty exciting to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Or, it just feels good, right? It just feels good.
And, we offer that assistance at different times and challenges in people's life. It might be that I have helped someone who has terrible arthritis and feels they can't do yoga. Yes, they can. And when they hear that I too have arthritis, in fact, I lost one of my hips to my work in dance, and it is yoga and the awareness that I've gained through it that has allowed me to move forward in that particular aspect. It might be that someone, constantly feels a certain pain in their body, or is constantly feeling they can't sleep, or, there are all sorts of things that may come up. And maybe there's just one little nugget that they take away from one of our classes together, or if they come into a longer training, and it begins to shift. It allows them to step into their power to realize they've got a say in this and they have options. I think that's the greatest thing. When people don't feel they have options, that's a very sad place to be. And
Yeah.
And we've all been there at times. And I think to recognize that through, and I think it's important as well, Donna, to say it's not a magical button that all of a sudden you do a down dog and everything's going to be, roses and daffodils coming up in your life. Of course it's not. Life is hard at times, but it gives us an endurance. It gives us a greater spectrum of options of how to deal with what comes at us and navigate through life.
Wonderful. What I'm going to ask you now, as we finish up, as we wrap up our conversation, just give us a little bit of information about what your main focus is going to be for our teacher training. As I said at the very beginning, you have your own teacher trainings, and you cover a lot. So I know that any part of the training you could do, but we've sort of, I know the kinds of things that I think that we need to hear in our teacher training that we can't necessarily get from some of the lineage that we have. So I think it's like super important to bring people in from the outside to give a little bit more well-rounded, information. There's so much to learn. And so just give us a little bit of what you're going to be focusing on.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be covering the anatomy and physiology aspect, which has become a very deep part of my life. My work, I also work at the college. I teach in a musical theater degree program up here, and I work with students to move them, to get them moving in dance form. And my yoga has been incredibly helpful in that, in terms of getting them past their minds and into the physical body. So I'm going to be doing that sort of work with your students as well, working into anatomy and physiology as it pertains to yoga practice. And also in that time, we're going to be looking at the fascial system. So how and why is a yin practice important to have as a balance to some of our yang practices, and to bring a real tangibility to it, to understand, particularly for some of us who we like the yang side. So why do we want to do that sort of side of yin that I'm not sure that we're doing anything in it? And I promise you, I'm going to dispel that myth. Yes. So that they come to understand. And you're talking to two youngsters here, right, Donna? Our background has been very yang, and it is the yin that I brought into a greater understanding through the fascial system. And that has allowed me to move through some of the greatest challenges in my life, having this balance between the yin and the yang. We need the yang sometimes, and we definitely need the yin sometimes. And I'm going to bring, hopefully, I will continue to bring a greater awareness, a greater understanding of this, and therefore a greater sense of wellness into each of your students' lives.
Oh, this is going to be great. It's just going to be great. I know everyone loved you the last time you were came to New York and participated live. Now, this time you're not going to be live, although if you do happen to be able to come to New York, then we'll meet you live again. But I know this information is very important, and it's been interesting and helpful for me as well. So I love learning from you and all the things that you've been focusing on over these years. And it's all good. So we look forward to working with you, and let's hope that we have a great teacher training. Yeah. So thank you for joining me. It's been great talking. We could go on and on and on and talk for hours, which of course we always do, but thanks for sharing.
Okay, Donna, thanks so much. And I look forward to working with all of your students. I love the New York state of mind, if I can borrow that term, and some of your students have been across the state. So that has been a really nice feeling to work with, that big country that sits underneath us here up in Canada. Is underneath us geographically, I mean, yes. And
yes.
So I really look forward to it, and to have all the wonderful discussions that will arise within our teachings together. So thanks, Donna. Thanks for inviting me, and I look forward to another wonderful season with you.